Well, good day, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live discussion, The State of Cyber Insurance and How to Stay Covered, brought to you by Optiv, the Cyber Advisory and Solutions Leader. I am Danny Pickens, Practice Director of Optiv's Enterprise Incident Management and Threat Intelligence Services. I'm really excited to be joined today by Derek Gibson, Optiv's Senior Manager for Cyber Insurance, and Mr. David Alkema, Optiv's Director of Demand and Delivery. This session is all about cyber insurance. With rising risks and ever-evolving threats, changes to what types of incidents can be claimed, and underwriting becoming a more stringent process, Darren and David are going to spend today diving into their thoughts and knowledge on the state of the industry and how organizations can navigate the insurance marketplace. Darren and David, thank you for joining us today. I'd like to just begin with a set of introductions for both of you, and then we'll dive right into our topics. Dara?
Thank you, Danny. So honored to be with Optiv and here today. I appreciate the opportunity to really shed light and educate people on the importance of enterprise organizations implementing both cyber insurance controls and insurance and cybersecurity platform management as well. So thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. David?
Hey, Dara. Hey, Danny. Glad to be here. I've been at Optiv about 10 years. I've been in IT about 25 years. Really excited to focus on helping our clients mature and enhance their security posture and really demonstrate the criticality of security within the broader discussion of corporate risk.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you both. Dara, we're going to begin with you as we go into our discussions today. So cyber insurance, it's not a new concept. And while the industry has seen tremendous growth, especially during the pandemic, in your viewpoint, how has the market changed over time? And what are some of the changes that you're seeing so far in 2023?
Absolutely. So you're right, Danny. It actually originated back in the 1990s when Ingram Micro suffered what we view as the first attack of data. And that was destroyed their data processes, and they tried to implement their property insurance claim, but they weren't able to due to the fact it was more of a cyber incident. So that's where the vision of cyber insurance originated from. But since then, changes have impacted, such as the California Online Privacy Act, as well as larger impacts to the business structures as a whole when ransomware was implemented across the board. Over the past few years, when insurance began, it was relatively inexpensive and easy to obtain. However, since the changes that we've seen with technology enhancements over the past couple of years, we've seen a sharp increase in premiums, as that is the direct relationships to the sharp increase of cyber events. We have a broader focus on the cyber supply chain factors that appear to be prevalent in today's ecosystems. According to the Insurance Journal, themes over 2023, we need to focus on the fact that we need to stabilize the market as a whole. Understand that underwriting standards are going to focus on the increase of technical management along with insurance management. And for this reason, that's where companies are going to understand that some of their previous included objects are now excluded in their policy written moving forward. So that's where the technical conversation is going to come into place to truly understand and how to sell insurance.
Okay, thank you. So as we look at how it's evolved and changed over the past 25, 30 years, why is the need for insurance increased?
Well, because the need of our technology basis, we're using technology on an everyday basis in business and in personal lives. And we're also finding that regulatory agencies are creating more security and privacy standards that will enhance fines and implications, which will crush an organization after the event, if the event didn't crush it in the first place.
That's a good point. David, switching over to you. Mm-hmm. You've been with the organization here at Optiv for 10 years now. Why does Optiv find cyber insurability relevant today?
Coming out of the second half of last year, really into this year, we've seen a tremendous increase of interest in insurance, which, coming from more of the attacker mindset, right? My first reaction was like, "Ooh, insurance." Not very exciting, but really it is, right? Because what we're seeing is there's just a disconnect between the carriers and the insureds. Right. So you have, from the insured perspective, you've got consumers that are struggling. They've got this changing landscape of what the carriers are requiring. What do they need to be prepared for? Are the controls they have in place sufficient, right? And they speak a very technical language of security controls and security technologies. On the other side, you've got carriers that are really not as familiar. They're speaking a business language around risk, around how do we know what our capabilities are? How can we ensure that, you know, you're actually as secure as you say you are? And there's just this disconnect. So really on both sides of the coin, they're trying to fix this. And we've seen, you know, again, carriers are doing things like ever increasing questionnaires and trying to obtain more data from clients. We've got consumers, you know, trying to figure out how to answer these things. How do you answer a yes, no question about a technology that may be implemented 80% of the way through your company? Again, all of these things create just a lot of confusion. And so to help bridge that, we created, working with the carriers and consumers, right, to understand like what's actually important to security. So we can help educate on the carrier side and also help client, you know, the consumers and the insureds understand what's coming, so they're not in this reactive mode. We developed our top 10 controls for insurability, and you know that's really designed to not just focus on the immediate concerns that people are getting when they get this letter from their carrier for renewal that says, oh, now you've got to have, hey, the bar just raised, you've got to do these other things. It's really set to help us, like, how do we project into the future over the next couple of years so we can be in a, you know, forward-looking mode and not in a reactive mode. So in, you know, on our site, you can find those 10 controls, but I think that, you know, the 4 initial ones coming out of the gate that we see focus around identity and access controls, you know, MFA, PAM, right? Detection and response, particularly EDR, ensuring that your company is doing security education across its full user base, phishing attacks, ensuring that you have hardening in those systems that your employees use to communicate with the outside world. And then also business resilience, right? So we've all heard the trope, right? It's not if, it's when, right? Which is, but it actually, there's a truth there. And so there's a lot of focus on how well are you prepared to recover, right? And I saw there was actually a question for that in the chat, right? And those things should help your rates. They should impact your coverage. So then the question becomes, how do we help bridge that communication back to the carriers so that they can understand the actual benefits of the technical controls that are in place? So Dara, I'm going to throw this question to you. I mean, why do you think what we're seeing and hearing are that, you know, from like a top 2, it's really about, do you have MFA? Do you have EDR? So just curious if you would expand on like why you think we're hearing that from the carriers.
Carriers have actually done some studies where they believe that if the MFA is properly installed across their ecosystem, not just 1 or 2, you know, people in the business, that a lot of the breaches will not occur as significantly or impact the organization as a whole. As long as there's EDR and MFA implemented, I think I read a statistic that 98% of the events may not be as significant as they would be had they not been, you know, ignored. And so that's why that's a lot of times where the insurance carriers are wanting those 2 specifically implemented, as well as backups, because backups provide that resiliency after the fact. To be able to come back and limit the business interruption claim, that's critical when it comes to utilizing your insurance policy.
No, too true. So I want to stay on that topic really, really quick. David, you talked about, you know, the yes/no questionnaire as insureds are going through the process. Dara, could you maybe speak to any recommendations that you have, you know, for a client to be able to tackle these cyber insurance questionnaires and requirements, and any recommendations that you might have for clients faced with maybe even the insurance renewal process?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's break that into 2 parts, though, because when you're actually applying for that insurance at that first case, you may not understand what the intricacies are asking for. Some insurance carriers are still asking yes, no. some are actually getting down to the nitty gritty of, what is the percentage of your usage of MFA? And so your organization may not understand the technical aspects of it. So really integrating the technical along with the business mindset provides amplification. And that's why Optiv really, with their forefront thought process, developed the insurance navigator piece of our sections to really work with the clients and give that technical and business mindset capabilities. And working alongside with the client gives that cohesive brand of Optiv being the foresight leader, as well as giving that ability to work together with the client really encompasses in a complete cyber program. Mm-hmm. Now, going back to the renewal question, it's, if you start early and open up that conversation with your broker, your carrier, and include your broker, your carrier, your vendor, and your leadership team into that conversation, that's where the renewal is going to be a lot easier. And truly understanding and working with, Optiv, how to make sure that the company is aligning it. Have you acquired new clients? Ask yourself several questions. Have you acquired new business partners this year? Maybe you even acquired other companies. We hope everybody's business is growing in revenue. That may impact your necessity for, insurance next year. And of course, with California's new CPRA implementation as of January 1, are you under any new privacy regulations? That is also going to impact your insurance policy moving forward. So really look at that. And then, of course, if you had to utilize your program, that's going to impact your premium as well. So working together with Optiv as well as your business leadership team prior to your renewal to give yourself ample time to put additional controls into place, that's going to make sure that you're subsequently doing the right thing along the way. Most people will ask also for backups. The old-fashioned rule of 3-2-1, having 3 copies of your encrypted backups in 2 different locations and 1 even off-site, that's going to create a really strong resilience, should the need arise to utilize it. All of these will make a difference to you as a business when you look at when your insurance carrier looks at you and says, hey, you've filled out the cyber navigator with Optiv, you've done these controls, you've worked cohesively with your brand. That's going to make you look like a better risk to your organization and, potentially really help you along the way on the insurance purchase.
So, Darrell, one of the questions that we've had come in through the panel is cyber insurance becoming just like regular insurance, whether it's your auto policy or whatever the case may be, and looking to really get out of supporting a claim more so than preventing a claim, right? Is there that risk transfer that happens with becoming insured?
Well, you have to understand insurance is truly just a risk transfer of financial impact costs, right? And so it's not an either or representation anymore. You can't just put cyber controls in and you can't just have insurance. You need to have that business mindset to put both in because they serve 2 different purposes. And really understanding the necessity for the after financial impact, that's where the insurance is going to come into play. So that's where I think that the insurance company wants to help. They want to be beneficial. They want to serve what's right. They also want to stay in business. And that's why we're seeing a lot of these premiums go up because people weren't doing what they said they did. Therefore, they became a higher risk to the insurance companies. So that's why, if everybody works together, that's where the brand is going to stick, moving forward, and the ability to have insurance will last longer.
Thank you. David, another question that came in from our panelists, if an organization has the ability to always recover from, say, a ransomware attack, wouldn't it be less risky play for them in reducing the cyber insurance premiums because they have that ability?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it should, right? And I think that's part of what we're working to introduce with this Navigator product is to help create that communication channel. Because we've had experience at a much simpler level of carrier questionnaires. They didn't understand, the difference between EDR and antivirus, right? So there's an education gap, right? A lot of the carriers working in the insurance space are not technical experts. They don't necessarily understand that there's lots of ways to achieve a similar security posture. But no, as I was saying, like to bridge that communication gap and and help the carriers understand like how these controls actually do accomplish what you're looking for, right? To understand that bigger picture. So yeah, I mean, I really do think that that is the space we're looking to help, right? Help have those conversations, help drive those conversations forward.
No, that's great. So, circling back into how requirements are changing, David, with these changing in requirements and sometimes just a simple yes/no questionnaire or even a more technical one, even if we're utilizing technical scans or the carriers utilizing technical scans for the underwriting process, how is Optiv really aligning with our carriers and brokers and the insureds to allow companies to be better?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in some ways, I look at this as sort of the same idea as physical security, right? So you have sprinkler systems in buildings. Is that good for you as a building owner? It is. Is that good for an insurance carrier? It is, right? It significantly reduces the cost of a fire if there's a sprinkler system in place that's functional. And again, I think what's interesting in this, we're in our current state, is like it's really in reactive mode, right? So there's been so significant of increases in ransomware and payouts and how to handle that. Do we pay ransomware? Do we not pay ransomware? Now the government says you can't. So who's going to, all those factors coming into play really just drives a lot of reactivity. And so from my perspective, right, we're working to develop a consistent place for collecting this information so that, I mean, there's another issue from like the consumer side of, if you want to shop rates, it's incredibly difficult. Like if everyone has a crazy long form to fill out that takes hours and lots of resources, right? Just the mere act of trying to shop rates is incredibly expensive. So again, how do you bring all this together into a consistent platform that allows you to share data in a consistent way with multiple carriers, look at different rate structures, understand, policies and which one is the best fit. And then from the carrier perspective, how do you know that your consumer, your client is actually doing what they're said they're doing? And so again, I think it really does create the need for some sort of intermediary space that can help say, put a stamp of approval from both sides.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's where Optiv can play a role, is working with the carriers to create that standardization of language and really help. So if you're filling out 20 different consultation questionnaires, if there's a standardization of the language across the board from the different carriers, I think that will help tremendously on the business decision to get insurance. And one of the questions that came in is, how do you decide whether or not you can even look at insurance? And that's where Optiv can be your partner to work with that Navigator program and look at the 10 controls and say, hey, are you working with these? Are you doing these? Are you implementing these properly? And because we have consulted with different carriers to make sure that we understand the two-way language and we're working with them to standardize language across the board, that's where we're going to be able to say, yeah, we've worked with carriers. We understand that this is what's moving in the industry. This is what's moving in the cyber industry. And this is how we're working together.
Yeah. So on that point there, as we're having these conversations with carriers and brokers, as well as the insureds, when you look at an organization and you look at the maturity level of their program, right? We've seen it all. We've seen some very, very mature programs out there, and we've seen some very immature programs that are either new or they haven't had the budget necessary to really mature the program. Is it really an organization security posture that determines that they can even be insured, or the amount of coverage they're going to get? Or are there cases where we've seen where they've been denied altogether because the program's just so immature?
Well, that's a portion of it, right? That's why they're also looking at how much data do you hold in your organization? Are you a health company that has, billions and billions of bytes of data, employees' names, clients' names, customer names, health records, all of across the board? That builds into the cost of the insurance policy, because that builds into the cost of the effect of what would happen should the need arise to use it. So there is, again, the need to standardize it, because some companies will say, we're asking for how much data you hold, whereas other companies may not need to know that. And that's where that standardization comes into play across the board.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, David, you'd mentioned in one of your comments earlier about government not allowing for the payment of a ransom in the event of a ransomware and an organization can't recover from backups. Maybe expound on that a little bit, and can you differentiate between maybe what's going to happen with the Department of Treasury's OFAC sanctions list and a payment going out to somebody that's on a watch list versus an organization being able to pay an entity that's not sanctioned?
Well, I think just the fact that there's so much confusion around it was really my point, right? Like the government is like, I don't know, because I'll be honest, I don't know enough to say, oh, this is the exact line, right? And I think that is part of the problem. No one does, anyone really, and what's it going to be next month or in 6 months? And so really, again, that was just to illustrate the point of there's so many factors and players and that impact the insurability and the insurance market at the place. We really sit in this reactive state at the moment in trying to work with carriers and what they're going to require just to be insured, or what they're going to pay for.
Well, that goes back to different nations as well. Some nations in Europe are saying no ransom, right? Whereas we as the US are still saying, hey, it's still a business decision, and we don't, agree with it, maybe personally, but if it's a business decision and it needs to be upheld, then I think at this stage, the federal mandate hasn't been no, right? So that brings that across that finish line. But David, to reiterate your fact of we've been so reactive over the past few years, that's why insurance companies are saying, hey, can we do better? Can we be better? And that's why I think working with Optiv really said, hey, let's develop these controls and say, we can be better. We can do better for our organizations and be more proactive rather than playing whack-a-mole 100% of the time. If you can put measures in place, you're going to keep it safe and sound. I take my car to my auto dealership to make sure my oil changes are done routinely. Because if I end up in a car accident, I don't want to have to, say, oh, I needed an oil change, And that's where the difference of IR versus, proactive measures come into play.
Well, we're also seeing different standardizations from, maybe federal guidance and regulations around things like payment for ransomware. But we're also seeing carriers that are coming out and somewhat changing the game as well with what they're going to allow to be claimed, right? But certain ransom payments aren't going to be claimed because they don't want to be fined. You see Lloyd's of London came out recently talking about if it's a nation state sponsored attack and an act of war type thing, it's not going to be claimable. So are there anything else or any things that you're seeing trending that way, Dara specifically, that we need to be aware of, or that could change the way that organizations are even looking at whether or not they want to consider continuing to get coverage?
So the policies themselves are going to start being worded differently to really provide clarification as to the exclusions as well as the inclusions of the policies. So that's where the brokers, carriers, and vendors need to work together. And it may mean bringing in cyber attorneys to say, hey, this is what this actually states and how it's interpreted properly. And having those alignments, so who your cyber breach attorney is, who your cyber vendor is, who your cyber insurance carrier is. Those are critical components of everyday workability in your policy, because you don't want to just reach for it when you desperately need it. If you work together along the way, that's where those are going to be provide higher education platforms. And I think that's where that fully comprehending what your policy states and not just signing it because you read the disclosure inclusion pages on the front 2 pages, really understanding that there's 74 other pages behind that maybe, have some intricacies that you need to understand.
Okay, thank you. So as we look at, aligning with our clients in preparation for renewals or to get insured, as we're having conversations with carriers and brokers, is there a certain approach that one can take to ensure that if they're utilizing an intermediary or or whatever the case may be, there's just not a standardization effort of pushing specific types of technologies over others. How do we circumvent that?
So I really do feel like that's where having something that's a little bit bigger and more broad than just the insurance company questionnaires really comes into play.
Mhm.
Because again, those questionnaires are designed to just do a basic health check, but we don't want, we really want to focus on the outcomes of the security controls. I totally agree with that, right? And we want to be able to communicate those outcomes over to the carrier so that they can understand, yes, maybe we got there a little bit different way, but there is still security there. I didn't use flammable materials when I built my building. It should matter, right?
Mhm.
All of those pieces, and just like we've managed that and done that in other industries.
So yeah, we're getting close to wrapping up. So as David continues to figure out what's going on with his microphone, Dara, any closing remarks that you would like to close down with today?
Having that general education and standardization of language, I think, is going to be critical moving forward. It's good to know that insurance companies are being more proactive in their seeking of renewals and policies moving forward. So I think that's going to help us along the way and really understand how to be more proactive and create that security framework foundation in our organizations. So I think that's going to help along the way and really keep insurance along the way. But we're going to see differences and changes as the market grows and changes. We're going to see differences of policies and how it's worded, because health insurance wasn't, what it looked like today. It wasn't that way 20 years ago, and cyber insurance won't look like this 20 years from now. So it's going to change. But I think in order to make it sustainable, we need to make changes as business owners.
Great, thank you. David, mic check. Are we good?
I think so.
All right. Any closing thoughts that you have, sir?
I think, again, just at the end of the day, we do need to focus on the actual security posture and being able to communicate that from a risk perspective, and bridge that technical controls gap over to the risk and the business discussion as well.
Great. Well, Dara, David, thank you both for joining us today and participating in what I think is a great conversation. For those of you in the audience, thank you for joining Optiv for our LinkedIn Live. Please look for more commentary on our company insights and solutions at optiv.com. And if you want to specifically reference the cyber controls that David and Dara were talking about, it's at optiv.com/cybercontrols. Again, thank you everybody today for attending. Dara, David, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Danny.